Hello everyone and welcome back to Do Digital's YouTube channel. Now I really apologize because I feel like I've been so quiet lately, but at the end of this video I'm going to do a little bit of a life update so you can see exactly what I have been up to. This video, as you can see from the title, is all about how to start a YouTube channel. A very good friend of mine, Michaela, asked me, how do you do it? What are the kinds of things that you need to be considering, and what really is important? Is lighting important? Is sound important? Because obviously people scare you with the amount of equipment and so forth that you need. And so I really just wanted to break down in terms of what is essential and what is not essential. The funny thing is I'm actually recording on two cameras, so you guys can actually see the difference in equipment and make a judgment call for yourself in terms of what equipment do you think is good quality, what do you think is bad quality, and that way it's like a really fun way of demonstrating that you don't actually need much. The first thing that you're going to want to consider is obviously your camera equipment. So one of Michaela's questions was, how do you shoot? Is it a question of going out and buying a camera? Can you shoot on an iPhone or a normal phone? What is really kind of the best practice? So as you can see, the two separate cameras are a little bit of a mind trick because what I'm speaking to now is an iPhone 8 Plus. So as you can see, I'm not shooting on any kind of different app, I'm just shooting on the native video app. Camera functionality. So there are video apps that you can use, and I'll link to those down below. If you guys have used them, I'd obviously love to hear your thoughts, but I just shoot on the regular gewone camera app. So let me know what you think of this. As you can see, it's a wide angle shot. It's pretty detailed if you ask me. I mean, the light looks good, and I'll get to the lighting in a second. This camera is my Canon 770D DSLR. 760D. So this is an entry-level DSLR camera. DSLRs are slightly different from mirrorless cameras, and that's kind of a story for another day, but I shoot on a DSLR. And this is really meant for like amateurs, amateur photography. It's not a high spec DSLR. The issue that I had when I first started the platform and immediately thought like I need a great DSLR, which is probably error number one, was that my old DSLR, which I bought when I was studying photojournalism, didn't have an aux jack. So if you are going to invest the money in a DSLR or borrow from a friend, which I would more likely recommend, because it is important to kind of see if it's going to suit your need and if it's exactly what you're looking for or not before you invest that amount of money, is to check things like, does it have an aux cable? The other thing that's incredibly important is the lens. So I'm currently shooting on a 50mm lens. Canon's and I think most cameras actually normally come with a 18 to 55mm lens. So I've actually swapped out the lens for a 50mm, which for photography is normally used for low light photography or portrait photography. So the challenge with this, and I'm not complaining because it's all been a learning curve for me, as I'm sure it is for you, is that the camera needs to be quite far away. So in actual fact, you're about 1.5 meters from me now, just to accommodate obviously for a lens that doesn't zoom. And to make sure that obviously I am in focus like that. Whereas with the iPhone, obviously lenses and that kind of thing are just totally not a concern, which is so awesome. It's like you really don't have to get bogged down or distracted by the technicalities. So if you're a beginner, I do suggest, if you have a good phone, testing out the quality of your video first, because the consideration, as I say, with a camera is then things like the lens, whether it has an aux jack, and just much more kind of to compute and to take into account. So if you're starting a YouTube channel, I highly doubt that someone's going to look at the quality of this video and say like, oh, you really need to upgrade your equipment, you know? I think we are all such perfectionists and we all just want the absolute best for our channel, but sometimes we're a little bit misguided because you don't have to go down that path of like blatant consumerism. The other thing obviously with the DSLR camera that's a consideration is a tripod. So obviously you can balance your camera on books or shelves or tables, but it does become quite onerous, especially if you're not shooting in the same place every time. So I've used a Manfrotto. It's a very old Manfrotto, but Manfrotto is like an incredible company. I mean, you can buy like the most amazing tripods these days where you can pan easily for video. Mine was just bought in third year journalism, so it really is the most basic one. I'm not going to link to it because I have doubt that it's even made any longer, but it's just an old school kind of Manfrotto tripod. So that's another consideration if you want to go the DSLR route. However, there is one handy thing that I found the other day at Audio Lens, which I thought I would show to you guys. So Audio Lens is just a little shop in the waterfront, but you can obviously get these from anywhere. I saw them on the Take A Lot website as well, so that's obviously always a possibility too. But basically what it is Manfrotto has a little mini lens called a Pixie. And so then this is like pretty much just a rip of the Pixie. So it's an absolutely tiny mini tripod and it cost me 250 Rand. So very affordable. I haven't used it yet, but I'm very excited to. And basically that just looks like this. So I mean, it's hardly a tripod. It really is just something to put your camera on and make sure that it's stable and secure. This, however, only fits a DSLR, right? There you go. So it just screws into the bottom. It's got one of these guys. Straightforward enough. So if you don't want to invest in a fancy Manfrotto or even a Manfrotto Pixie, which I think is about 500 Rand, you can get one of these for half the price. So that's one option if you're going to go with a DSLR. However, if you're not going to go for the DSLR, I'll show you what I'm using for my phone. So just moving back to this camera, as you can see, this is just one of these really simple bendy gorilla tripods. I'm not going to bugger it too much. But it's really great because if, for example, you like to vlog in your car or you like to do, I don't know, just crazy stuff like hike mountains with your camera and so forth, you obviously can't then not have somewhere to put your camera. Like I tried shooting the other day and I was like propping my phone up between like benches and stuff like that, and I could just see that people were giving me like weird looks and I felt super awkward. So I was like, no more of that. So this is called a Rolei. I'll also link it down below. It's like super cheapy. The one thing that I have heard about these gorilla pods, that's the official brand, but you know how we roll in South Africa / with our Chinese imports. So the Rolei, I have heard negative reviews in terms of if you bend it too much, it's obviously going to break. I mean, you run the risk of dropping your camera because it's just kind of mounted on that phone mount. You cannot shoot vertically with them, you can only shoot horizontally, but really I think it's a brilliant solve in terms of interim shooting on your phone. So in other words, what I'm saying, and the point of my long story, is that you can see that the camera quality is obviously beautiful on a DSLR, but bear in mind that it's far away from me, it's on a tripod, and it's in terms of an audio perspective, because it's far away from me, I'm having to ad-lib there too. From an iPhone perspective, I haven't had to worry about lenses. I'm using a little mini fake gorilla pod, and yeah, you can see the lighting's good and it's a wide angle, so no need to fuss with that. However, obviously there are ways to mitigate the expenses with the DSLR. I bought the bottom of the range, and my tripod's very old, so you can borrow that. Alternatively, obviously, the mini tripod is going to be a great option, and so that's an affordable DSLR setup, and this is an affordable iPhone setup. The last thing to consider when it comes to the DSLR setup is the sound, right? So because my camera is now, as I say, 1.5 meters from me, the sound is not going to be great. It's going to be echoey, especially depending on what room you're shooting in. Do you have a carpet? Do you have a couch? Do you have a bed? All of those are great. But even with those kind of cushioners, it can be terrible audio. So what am I using there? So this is actually a Rode microphone that typically you would plug into the jack of your, so where you'd put in a flash on a camera, you just push it in like that. And so then this makes it a great mic for vlogging, which is awesome. I think it is good value for money. There is a slightly cheaper one which just has a shorter grade ball on it. This one is slightly longer, but the audio quality is really great. So I must say I can vouch for Rode as a brand. I think it's definitely worth the money, and I'm sure there are cheaper versions out there, but for me, I think it's great. It does have a little battery. It's quite a large battery that you'd have to obviously put in there. But yeah, the audio you can hear is great. If you look at my previous videos, I typically will always have a laptop in front of me, which, yes, sometimes I want to hear what I'm, or want to think about what I'm going to say, and put it down on a Word document or so forth. But most of the time I'm just concealing my mic. So the reason why I obviously can't put it onto the camera is that doesn't then help for the distance between me and my camera. So I've kind of made things a little bit difficult for myself. So what I've then had to do is buy a longer cable, which, as you can see, is quite a lot of yeah, it's quite a lot of length. I think it's like a 3 meter. But it basically just means that I can still use my mic, I can still get great sound quality, but it's not sitting on my jack like it normally would be. But again, as you can tell, things do get complicated quite quickly. So once you've added up the cost of the tripod, of your lens if you don't want to use the default one, of your Rode microphone, of the extension cable, then it's all getting quite hectic. So the iPhone, on the other hand, it would just be the little Gorilla Pod, which I think is also around 250 Rand mark. I'll link down below. The brand that I have, as I say, is a Rolei, so it's not even a real Gorilla Pod. And I think it looks good. So yeah, I'm gonna leave that up to your guys' discretion. The last thing that I do just want to talk about is the lighting. So you won't believe the lights that I'm using. This is like my favorite YouTube hack, and I don't know what other people do, because obviously windows are your best friend, right? There's a window right here, can you tell? So the window is gonna be your absolute best friend. There it is. Because it's gonna basically fulfill like a filler flash function, which is so awesome. So if there are any shadows cast on your face, it'll obviously just fill it in, make you look 10 years younger, you know what I'm saying. So that is obviously essential. But if you find, for example, you want to film after hours in the evening, how on earth do you now film? Like, it's difficult. Your light's going to be terrible. I, for example, have sunlight in the room that I typically film in. So sometimes you either have not enough light, or you have like a harsh shadow being cast on your face. And altogether, it's just really, really not great. So this is my favorite part. Enter this little hack. So my brother actually made this for me, and it's just the coolest thing. I absolutely love it. So it's got two kind of like nozzles on it, and basically what it is it's epoxy little strip lighting. So there you can see the cool colors are on, there you can see it's off, there you can see the warm colors are on, and there you can see the cool and the warm colors are on. So basically what that means, and I'll show you the effect on my face, is that in addition to the lighting that's coming from this side because of the door and the window, I'm actually able to then also manipulate the temperature of the light. So here we go, let's try cool light. Looks pretty average. Let's try warm light. Looks okay. I look more tan, so that's definitely a plus. But I like actually just manipulating it so that it's a little mixture of both, because I feel like that looks the most natural and it's less obvious that I'm using fake lighting. However, I have read people say that if you're gonna go for artificial lighting, only artificially light, and if you're gonna go for natural lighting, then only natural light. To be honest with you, I think it's totally up to you. As with most things in life, it's a matter of preference. I find it easier to see, is there good light, and then augment it with a little bit of artificial, or if there isn't, then I just do artificial, which a lot of my videos are shot, you know, in the late afternoon or evening when I get home from work, and it's obviously difficult to rely purely on natural light. So that's kind of the setup. In terms of editing, and again, preference comes in so dramatically. So when I started my YouTube channel, I was filming and editing on Wondershare Filmora, which is a paid for software, but it's very cheap. And I promise you, if you can edit, if you can spend an hour just getting familiar with the platform, you will be A for a way. So there's not a long learning journey, it really is straightforward. You just basically cutting things and adding in transition. So it's very similar to iMovie, which I know a lot of people also like. I didn't have an iPhone at the time when I started the channel last year, so that was what I was kind of relying on. However, I wanted to do the right thing, which again complicates our lives, but we still want to do it. So I swapped over to Adobe Premiere Pro. And I really thought, how hard can it be? You know, it's like, surely if I'm now familiar with Monetisation for Monetisation and the basic principles of editing, I'll be fine on Adobe Premiere Pro. But I had the same struggles as what I had when I was studying photography and learning Photoshop. It is not straightforward. So obviously you can sit on YouTube if you have the patience to do that and just constantly check basic editing principles. That's no problem. There's a lot of people with incredible resources, and hopefully I can link some of those down below in terms of who I was sitting on YouTube and watching, and just to get a feeling and a flair for the different kinds of effects that you can do, but it's very time consuming. So if your vlog or your YouTube channel is just an amateur thing that you're trying to kind of get into, then I would suggest actually using something like iMovie or Monetisation for Monetisation. In terms of YouTube in and of itself, so regardless, now you've got your equipment and you're feeling a little bit more settled in terms of shooting and editing, there are some things to keep in mind. So it's a crazy world out there, and people will always be mean. So it took me a long time to overcome being an introvert and not wanting to put myself out there, because I was so frightened of what people would say about me. In my mind, I was like, they're gonna think that I'm not educated on this topic, that I'm not well equipped to speak publicly. But to be honest with you, 90% of the time people are very supportive, and the one good thing is it'll show you who your friends are very quickly. So my friends were so sweet to me about it. They all just expressed like a lot of joy and pride, saying like, it's really brave of you to do something like this and put yourself out there on the internet. Obviously the 10% is people saying that your audio is not great quality, or can they take you on a date, or just those sorts of things. You know, it's not, I don't think anyone is like trying to like take you down from a cyberbullying perspective on YouTube any more than the next platform, but there's obviously going to be some level of nastiness. But I do just think, in terms of the reward and the recognition that you get from YouTube and the personal fulfillment, it's definitely not enough to let people like that get you down, because why are they so concerned in your life is like always my number one question. It's because they're sad in theirs. So it's really not something that you need to give a lot of thought or effort to. And so I do just suggest, if you want to start a YouTube channel, just start. You don't have to worry about people's judgment. It really is none of your business what people think of you. And I think I've found that the very long route, and I wish someone had said to me, firstly, people don't think about you as much as you think they do, and secondly, even if they do, so what? So what? You know, I've seen people that have written nasty things about me, and I have nothing, I have no words. I'm just like, you know, like, good for you. If that makes you feel good about yourself, putting other people down, like, that's what you have to live with. So I would really suggest just putting yourself out there and putting your focus towards people who are going to be truly supportive, and not giving any thought or any consideration to people who are going to be negative by nature. In terms of YouTube monetization, I'll pop the stats on the screen in terms of the watch hours that you need in order for your channel to be monetized, but YouTube's made it a lot harder. So I, for one, do not earn a cent off my YouTube videos, nor are they sponsored. So for me, it really is just a passion thing. Other people obviously do earn money, but there's like quite stringent requirements around the kinds of content that you post and making sure that that's appropriate. And then also obviously things like not using copyrighted music is also very important. In terms of things like background music, the best thing that I think is just to YouTube royalty-free music. So it would be ideal if you could partner with local artists and ask them if you could use their songs in order to get exposure, but obviously no one wants to work for exposure. So it's quite a difficult conversation to have. And that's why I suggest just sticking to royalty free. But if you do have a musician friend or you are a musician, then obviously that's great. And then finally, if you guys do want to stick around, a little bit of a life update. So I've taken the time just to reflect on my priorities in life and what's really important to me at this point in time as a 29-year-old living in Cape Town, and most days just trying to get by. And YouTube, as I say, was started to promote my business, which I was kind of doing in a freelance capacity. So I was always working, even though I was running a digital academy and a YouTube channel. From a financial perspective, it's just totally impossible to expect YouTube to sustain you. It's brought me no money, as I've mentioned, and so similarly with the freelance work, it's obviously very dependent on the season, the clients that you have, and also the kinds of projects. So I was building websites, which is notoriously long. Even if you have a simple website brief, it'll often take you a long time. Clients will pay late or not at all. So I was really battling in terms of trying to get that right. So I then started to look for a more kind of permanent position, and I found the most amazing role. So I decided to sign with that, which has meant that YouTube has taken a bit of a backseat, but I think when you're presented with an incredible opportunity, it's obviously something that you have to pursue wholeheartedly and not kind of hold back on. And so I feel like my YouTube time will come. It's brought me, as I say, so much joy. If I think back on the kinds of things that it's kind of exposed me to, I'm actually in absolute awe. Like, for someone that's an amateur YouTube lover, you know, to get 26,000 views on a video is so deeply exciting to me, because I hope that I've helped someone and I've had a lot more of an impact than I would have had in my day-to-day life. I was also contacted by Google. I was offered a job by Facebook Joburg. So there was all kinds of incredible byproducts of starting a YouTube channel that I just could never have anticipated before I'd done it. So that's why I'm so vocal about saying to people, the benefits are not the benefits that you anticipate. It's not money, it's not fame, it's not, you know, your life will be no better as a result, but the satisfaction and the joy that it brings you, that is where I'm like, oh my gosh, absolutely, YouTube is just so incredible. It's so fulfilling. The people that you meet through it, the people that connect with you through it is just amazing. And yeah, so that's really more the rationale than anything else for me personally. And that, I guess, kind of concludes it. So just to explain, that's obviously why I've been MIA from YouTube. I had to take a full-time job just to kind of get by, as we all do, but it's not to say that I'm not planning a lot of content and I'm not super excited to get back into things now that I'm settled in my new role. So I really hope that this video was useful to you guys, and I cannot wait to see you in our next video so that we can do digital better.